Some very interesting dynamics are happening right now to the US housing market. I'm going to talk about what's happening right now regarding home prices, housing inventory, home sales, and of course, price reductions as well. This is based on my very nerdy analysis of the latest data from Realtor.com. I will also provide a summary at the end of this video to kind of go over what's been happening in the housing market over the past month or so. Anyways, I have a lot to share. Let's go and dive right in. This is a report from Realtor.com posted last week. Of course, I did not even read it. Instead, go to Realtor.com/research/data. Click on weekly inventory. You can click on monthly. It shares monthly trends with actual numbers. But today's video is looking at weekly numbers. And that is this right here. So we're going to talk about asking prices, inventory levels, new listings, days in the market, and of course, price drops. The most recent trends we have from them is the week ended November 30th. So asking prices actually increased by 0.2% compared to the same week in 2023. Albeit small, this is the first increase since May. Asking prices have been down or relatively flat from a year ago for 27 consecutive weeks. Asking prices of houses for sale are down because inventory is much higher today than it was 1 year ago. In other words, more competition amongst home sellers, which puts downward pressure on home prices. And sales are still historically low as well due to affordability constraints for buyers. Let's also discuss active listings or house inventory. So inventory has been higher compared to the previous year for 56 consecutive weeks. More than a year now in which inventory was higher compared to the previous 12-month period, going back to mid-November of 2023. However, the gain of 26% last week is tied for the smallest year-over-year change since the end of March this year. This is likely due to a significant rise of pending sales and a decrease of newly listed houses. And that's this right here. According to Realtor.com, for the month of November as a whole, they posted this about a week ago. It says pending listings continue to rebound in November, increasing by 14.7% compared to November of 2023. Just under 50% more than October's year-over-year gain of 9.9%. So pending home sales increased by nearly 10% in October, then they increased further up by nearly 15% in November. In contrast, look at new supply in the market, new listings. That actually was 2% above last year's levels, a sharp decrease from October's rise of 4.9%. So in October, we saw an increase of new listings up by 4.9%, and pending home sales rose by 9.9%. Now, fast forward to November, new listings rose by only 2%, and pending sales rose even more than the 10% gain. They're now up by 15%. So in other words, demand is increasing at a faster pace compared to new supply hitting the market. And this, my friends, is one of the reasons why inventory levels has been stalled out. We're not seeing enough new listings hitting the market. And also we're seeing a lot more contracts being signed between buyers and sellers, which is limiting home price or inventory growth. Of course, this deceleration of inventory is bad news for home buyers, but good news is that at least there's more house for sale compared to last year. Quite a bit different than the depletion we saw in 2021 and 2022. So therefore, due to this rise of inventory from last year, this means you have more negotiating power as a home buyer. So here's some advice for you guys. If you guys are looking to buy a house, in December or early parts of 2025, if you're looking for a house to buy in an area that has a significant amount of houses for sale, a big increase supply, then go find a deal. Write offers that are well below asking, and go and try to find a house in which you can get a house for far less than asking price. In contrast, you also can look at a brand new house, a brand new home construction. And my advice for you guys regarding that is try to find a house that's completed, because a builder is much more motivated to sell a completed house compared to a dirt lot in which they haven't even started construction. On top of that, I'll add a caveat there, is that builders often really want to unload or get their houses sold right before fiscal year end. Some builders have a fiscal year end, just like other companies, of 12/31. So their fiscal year ends in the calendar year at 12/31. So if you find a builder in the area you want to buy in which they have a fiscal year end of 12/31, then right now in mid-December is probably a great time to buy or put a deposit down on a brand new house that is completed. In Sacramento, for example, I've been touring new builds for about a couple weeks as of late, and a lot of builders are offering these, buy downs for a 30-year fix at 5%, for example, or a 2-1 buy down. On top of that, also offering a closing cost credit as well. So they're throwing all these incentives at buyers because this is a slower time of our housing market right now. And on top of that, if they have a fiscal year end at 12/31, obviously they'd be more incentivized to sell the houses they have available for sale. Let's also discuss the bad news for home buyers though as well, because even though we have more houses for sale from last year, home prices still remain very much elevated, which makes it very challenging for buyers to buy houses right now due to affordability constraints. Here's my biggest takeaways regarding active listing inventory. So inventory growth has been stagnant, mainly from a low amount of houses being listed for sale or new listings. For example, since early May this year, new listings have been up from a year ago by only single digits, less than 10% for the most part. Prior to that, it was on the rise by more than 10% for 2 consecutive months. I also want to share my own analysis of altosresearch.com's data as well, because they share inventory numbers on a weekly basis as well. So based on their data, there's approximately 143,591 existing house for sale, more so compared to 12 months ago, an increase of 143,000. That's an increase of 26% year over year. 3 months ago, though, the gain was only 38%. So we're seeing this deceleration of inventory growth, whereas 3 months ago, we're up by 38%. Now we're only up by 26%. So still up from last year, but increasing at a slower rate. On top of that, according to their data, there's 191,000 more existing houses for sale compared to the start this year. That's an increase of 38% year to date. Versus this time last year, it was only up by 16%. So in other words, inventory has grown more than twice as fast as last year so far. It's also rising much faster than pre-COVID levels as well. According to data from NAR, or the National Association of Realtors, housing inventory rose on average by 13% from January through October in 2017 through 2019. Versus a gain of 36% so far this year. Therefore, it has increased nearly 3 times faster this year. However, the year-to-date increase this year is much less than the same time frame in 2022. Back then, it increased by 44%. And again, this year, it increased by 36%. In my personal opinion, home price growth should slow down in the coming months due to 5 main reasons. Number 1, the decline of asking prices of house for sale, or relatively flat numbers. Number 2, more inventory. Number 3, seasonality, because our housing market tends to slow down in November through January. Number 4, a sluggish rate of home sales. And of course, number 5, elevated mortgage rates. To summarize, inventory is rising more than twice as fast as last year and looking at pre-COVID levels as well, but slower than 2022. Lastly, even with this uptick of inventory levels, we're still down by about 14% compared to the same time frame in 2019. All right, so again, like I mentioned, one of the culprits for this kind of stagnation of inventory growth is due to a lack of new supply in the market. So new listings last week decreased by 29%. This is kind of an anomaly, or it is a complete anomaly, because this is during the Thanksgiving holiday for the week ended November 30th. So obviously during a holiday week, a lot of people, or a lot of homeowners, don't want to list their house for sale due to the fact that a lot of people are out of town, right? So it does make sense that we saw a huge decrease last week during the Thanksgiving holiday. Therefore, with the exception of last week, new listings have either been going down slightly or have increased by less than 10% ever since the end of July this year. In contrast, they rose by over 10% from February through April this year. So we were seeing a big increase compared to 12 months prior to that, back in February through April. But ever since then, we've been seeing kind of this relatively low level of new listings. And like I mentioned right there, this has caused inventory to basically stall out during that time frame as well. You actually can see this looking at the data here. Looking at the beginning of January, inventory levels were up by only 6.4%. But basically every single week through really the spring home buying season and the summer months, we saw huge gains, and it basically topped out at a gain of 38.1% back in the end of June this year. Ever since then, it has been stalled at around 30 to about 38% for quite some time, September through really June this year. And ever since then, we've been seeing this kind of like stagnation of inventory growth has been paid around 25 to 30% ever since the end of September this year. And that is due to the fact of this right here. New listings increasing by less than 10% virtually all year from, when was this? The end of July through, of course, the end of November this year. Prior to that, we saw big increases of new supply in the market back in early February through late March. And in fact, it actually kind of continued in April, but ever since then, we've been kind of seeing this low level of new supply that's being listed for sale. So here's my take. New listings have lost momentum due to 7% rates. Once again, many sellers are buyers because a lot of people don't want to trade in their 2.5% to 5% rate and buy a new house at a 7% rate. That has been limiting the amount of new supply in the market. So therefore, we basically had this lock-in effect for about 2 years now due to the fact that the Fed decreased the federal funds rate so much and then took so long to start increasing rates back in 2022. Also, it's noteworthy that mortgage rates are lower right now than they were 1 year ago. But despite that, sellers have not come back. Buyers, on the other hand, have come back, as can be seen by the numbers I was sharing earlier. Pending home sales increasing by 15% compared to the 10% gain we saw in November, whereas new supply in the market only increased by 2%, quite a bit less than the gains we saw back in October. All right, changing gears slightly here to talk about how fast or how slow houses are selling. So last week, it took 9 days longer to sell a house compared to the same week of 2023. This marks the 30th consecutive week in which houses took longer to sell. This is much different compared to October of 2023 through March this year, where houses on average were selling faster compared to the previous year. As houses are taking longer to sell, here's the impact to our housing market. Inventory is higher than last year due to houses taking longer to sell and sales remaining historically low. However, new listings have completely lost momentum, as I described, from the rise of mortgage rates due as, of course, sellers are buyers as well. So people don't want to sell their houses because they don't want to exchange their low rate for a higher one, which is limiting new listings. And that altogether is keeping a lid on the growth rate of housing supply. Let's also talk about the number of price drops as well, because according to Realtor.com, that actually decreased by 31.1% year over year. I'm not really sure how to kind of make up or try to figure out what's happening or what did happen during Thanksgiving week. So here's my take. Let me know what you guys think about this. This obviously is a very unusual decrease because the 2 weeks prior to that, we saw a gain of 20.3% year over year. And 2 weeks ago, we saw a gain of 33.1%. Therefore, this decrease of 31% could be due to the Thanksgiving holiday week. So during that time frame, sellers either take their houses off the market altogether and then relist sometime next year, or they decide not to reduce their asking price during a holiday week when a lot of people are out of town. It wouldn't make sense to reduce your asking price during a holiday week in which you're probably not going to get a lot of improvement on an increase of buyer interest when people are out of town celebrating the holiday. So my take is that next week, once they announce that tomorrow, we'll probably see a bigger uptick, or we'll likely see an uptick, or maybe an unusual uptick compared to what happened the week ended November 30th. All right, if you guys are still watching today's video, then please hit the like button. I really appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. Of course, please consider subscribing as well. I want to provide a summary of today's video. So number one, asking prices have been either down or relatively flat year over year for the past 27 consecutive weeks. This is from more houses for sale, more inventory levels. Sellers, therefore, have to compete against each other more as more houses are for sale or as inventory is growing, causing asking prices to either decrease or remain relatively flat. Number 2, housing inventory increased by 26% year over year last week, and that's tied for the smallest year-over-year increase since the end of March this year. Inventory gains are losing momentum, mainly from a slowdown of new listings, as well as the increase of new pending home sales. So a decrease of new supply in the market, but an increase of contracts being signed. Of course, real estate is regional, it's local, right? So as of November, there's now 10 states, according to ResiClubAnalytics.com. They pulled data from Realtor.com, by the way. There's now 10 states that have more existing houses for sale this November compared to November of 2019. Just back in August, there was only 4 states, by the way. So those 10 states that have more inventory compared to pre-COVID levels are Texas, Idaho, Florida, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Washington State, and Oregon. Higher compared to 19. The states that are likely soon to join this list are Alabama, Nebraska, Hawaii, and Georgia. In general, areas that have more inventory compared to 2019 are experiencing slower gains of inventory growth, home price growth, and in some cases, outright decreases. Number 3, we all know that the vast majority of homeowners have a rate far below current rates. Approximately 70% of homeowners who do have a mortgage have a rate below 5%. And of course, that's keeping a lid on new listings, which of course is contributing to this lack of growth of inventory on a national level. I'll say this again, I do not expect to see a surge of people listing their house for sale unless we start seeing for selling due to unemployment spiking. So far, we're not seeing that. The unemployment rate as of, in November is at 4.2%. So we're not really seeing a lot of for selling right now. Number 4, the share price drops is about the same as it was about 1 year ago, but lower than 2022. Also, in a span of 6 months in 2022, the share of price drops skyrocketed from 17% to 40%, so more than doubling. Now, looking at the same time frame this year, the share of price drops went from 30% at the trough to now only 38%. We're not seeing a shock of our housing market like we saw in 2022, when rates went from 3.5 to over 7% in less than 1 year. And of course, that caused inventory levels to skyrocket due to a huge decrease of sales. Number 5, last week it took about 9 days longer to sell a house on average. As houses are taking longer to sell, this has contributed to the rise of housing supply, but that has been keeping a lid on that based on a lack of new listings. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about mortgage rates. So the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate, according to the Mortgage News Daily, based on a survey they do, is around, or has been around 7% ever since November this year. Housing affordability has improved somewhat due to a decrease in rates from last year, but remains an issue due to elevated home prices and, of course, in some markets, elevated home insurance rates as well. Affordability constraints can be seen by the low amount of existing houses for sale this year. We should end the year at around 4 million sales. If we get to below 4.09 million like we saw last year, we'd be at a 29-year low in existing home sales in 2024. I expect that number to be right around 4 million. But it's gonna be interesting though, because pending sales have been rising quite a bit. So potentially it could be higher than last year, but it won't be very much higher. It'll probably be, I'm guessing, probably a little bit lower than 2023. Anyways, moving on. Number 2, despite a small decrease in mortgage rates compared to 1 year ago, mortgage purchase applications, that's from the MBA, actually increased by 4% year over year for the week ended November 6th, according to the MBA. Also, NER reported that pending home sales actually in October increased by 5% compared to 12 months ago. In contrast, new home construction sales, that's defined as a deposit taken or a sales agreement signed between a buyer and a home builder for the month of October still, actually decreased by a whopping 9% year over year. Home builders are still using sales incentives in order to attract buyers, but of course, that didn't seem to really happen in this October on a national level. On top of that, builders are still facing headwinds because the amount of houses for sale that they have, these are be dirt lots, a home under construction or a completed house, total numbers here is on par with 2008 levels. Number 3, looking forward for the nation as a whole, asking prices have been relatively flat for several months. Inventory is higher than last year. Houses are sitting on the market longer, and price drops are more common now than they were in 2019. We have been moving towards a buyer's market, but of course, every market's different. Inventory in California, for example, is down 14% compared to 2019, but inventory is up by more than 15%, I should say 15% or more, in Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Tennessee. Number 4, the most important one. I appreciate you guys so much for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe. Also, if you guys want a real estate agent referral, then please check out my website, which of course is realestateteamfinder.com. Or if you want to buy or sell a house in the greater Sacramento area or the San Francisco Bay Area, we cover those areas, then please email me at jason@meetjasonwalter.com. The vast majority of our clients actually come from YouTube, believe it or not. Anyways, thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.